Hey, everybody. Welcome back to your Dawn of Autonomy podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host, CEO of P3 Tech Consulting and publisher at Autonomy Global. I'm on the road as are our guests. This is Energy Month, and we are in the Petro Metro in Houston, Texas, all participating in the Energy Drone Robotics Coalition Summit. This is part of a four-part series. I think we're on number two for Charlton Evans at End State Solutions. And he's got with him his collaborator, Nate Ernst from the Tactien group. And it's so great to have you both on the show.
Thanks for having us, Don.
Absolutely. So just kind of fair warning for everybody out there. Obviously, we're all in our hotel rooms, riding hotel Wi-Fi at a conference. So hopefully this will just go okay. But we're really excited to talk about this new collaboration between End State Solutions and the Tactien Group today. Before we get to that, I want to first have everybody introduce themselves a little bit. So, Charlton, let's start with you and let's get into your background.
Yeah, so hey, Charlton Evans, CEO of End State Solutions, been running End State since 2018. Prior to that, I was with In Situ, a Boeing subsidiary, manufacturer of the Scan Eagle. Was in the services part of that business, and prior to that, the Marine Corps as a JTAC and a Harrier pilot.
So cool. Thank you for your service, by the way. We got an awesome picture there. Pinto is your call sign. There's always a story behind this. Can you share?
Yeah, it requires beer, but
Okay.
the squadron did sunset. They sunsetted the Harrier, and my squadron 223 was the last squadron to be in active duty. So now it's handed off to the F-35.
All right. So you heard it here first, everybody. Pinto is the call sign. And if you want to know more, you got to buy him a beer. So, all right, Nate, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, thanks, Don. My name's Nate Ernst. I'm the president of a company called the Tactien Group. We're involved in vetting, validation, and program stand-up, primarily with advanced UAS and then also counter UAS technologies, specifically centered on the infrastructure industry, a lot of energy and utility. Prior to the Tactien Group, I come from the operator side of UAS commercially. Started out in Group 1s all the way through Group 4. And then also have significant experience, not in actually piloting manned aircraft for utility work, but the operations of manned rotorcraft and fixed wing for utility operations as well. So that's in a nutshell. That's who I am.
All right, very, very good. So, Nate, you mentioned the Tactien group, and tell us a little bit more. Why did you create it? What problem were you trying to solve? What did you see out there that you were like, hey, I have some ideas and solutions here, so I'm going to create this company?
Sure. So I think unofficially, maybe officially, this is my 17th year in the industry. So I was around primarily as a Group 1 service provider of SUAS starting around 2010-ish. That was before Part 107. That was back during the 333 days, before the FAA really understood how to actually regulate commercial UAS and the NAS. So it's been an interesting ride. I've been super fortunate to be a part of a lot of groundbreaking programs, doing a lot of very interesting things, right? And so, on the downside, I sacrificed a lot of my professional and personal life to gain those experiences. And while there was a lot of very good things that came out of those approvals, there was also a lot of tough lessons learned. And so throughout my career, having the opportunity to work with some really talented folks and some very leading organizations, there was a lot to be learned. And, as the industry evolved and I lived through the evolution of the beginning of the commercial industry, I took a step back a couple of years ago and I said, hold on, what's actually happening here? Right? There's all these aircraft and OEMs that are building new technologies. There's all these regulations that are changing, which are incredibly complex. And that's where I call on Charlton for that stuff, because that's his swim lane. But there's all these different ConOps and all of these different ideas and these programs that are very expensive to build. And the ROI in building those programs has a very thin margin of error. And especially now that we're looking towards BVLOS and Part 108 and the 44807 work, you go ahead and invest in some of these programs. And I'm saying, guys, hold on a second here. There's a couple guardrails we need to look at before you build this budget. There's a couple gating criteria we need to go through to see if we can actually build this program and your budget's successful. And right, so, you know, where my perspective comes is I'm completely unbiased to all of this. I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of these technologies. And now I'm in the business of knowledge transfer to say, hey, utility X or energy company Y, let's think about these things and we'll help guide you through that process. Once your program is built and it's healthy, it's yours. But if the program ever gets sick, you can give us a call and we can help you out.
Yeah, awesome. We're going to pick your brain, both of you collectively, about some of those hard-earned lessons learned to kind of, you know, tell the audience some things they need to be thinking about. But before we do that, Charlton, you know, Harrier pilot, great work at In Situ. I know groundbreaking work in terms of some of the approvals that you got with Boeing. Tell us a little bit about End State Solutions and kind of your inspiration to create it.
Yeah, well, and that's part of the reason that Nate and I are collaborating is we're very complementary in what the two groups bring together. So we've been focused largely on airworthiness with the operational approvals that go with that in complex operations. And that's actually where Nate and I met primarily, was under the program that we were doing for Chevron when Nate was with the OEM AATI flying the AI Ranger. And we were on board with Chevron to get them the operational approval they needed for the 91-113 BVLOS waiver in San Joaquin Valley. So that was, you know, again, a hard problem to solve when you're trying to cover the kind of airspace they needed, like up to 8,000 feet and all over the central Californian geography. So we got that approval, and again, kind of a burden shared is a friendship earned. And I saw Nate's talents there, and we've come a long way from the early days with In Situ, where we got some operational approvals that were historic, but they, to Nate's point, they really didn't breed further success for the company, right? The commercial market was hard. It's, again, narrow margins, and the ways that we had to go get approvals took years, right? So it was tons of man hours and very intensive work with the FAA. And the FAA was not in a big hurry, understandably, because they were trying to make sure everything was safe. Still true today. But we're seeing more breakthroughs where the FAA has almost normalized the way they do business with this industry in terms of complex approvals. The FAA is not fast across any program. We just finished some work with the 777 STC, and that was a 6-year program that we just got on the tail end of to help get it over the finish line. But,
okay, you just did an acronym, or the 777 STC.
Oh, sorry, right, supplemental type certificate. So changing passenger 777s into freighter 777s.
Okay.
And program that the customer hoped would take about 4 years ran into 6. So we got pulled in to do some troubleshooting on that and helped out. But so that's part 25 under the rules. Very slow processes to get that big stuff done. When we work in 107, you can get approvals now in a couple of months at best, you know, maybe a few months. But and for more complicated approvals, it's still several months of work. You know, we say, you know, maybe 6 months if you need a complicated BVLOS waiver. But that's a far cry from where it started out a long time ago with the 333s and whatnot. So there are still some rigorous processes, but the complicated ones, the hard ones, that's where we really shine. And that's kind of why I kicked off End State, was because we had the team, we knew what the problem sets were, and we could come address that for industry, and we're still doing it today.
Yeah. So we, you know, we're at an interesting, I'd say inflection point for the industry right now, from the regulation side, certainly from the technology side. I mean, look, we're all here at Energy Drone and Robotics Coalition Summit, 10th annual, by the way, everybody. And if you missed our AGN live stream yesterday, go back and check it out. It was awesome. Here's our panel that we did together yesterday with some asset owners and operators and some other industry leaders talking about beyond visual line of sight. I mean, that's kind of the game right now. And as you said, Charlton, you know, we're kind of in the waiver world for 107. Nate has been very much involved in 44807 for some of those larger aircraft.
Yeah, we've got about four of those exemptions we crafted for customers that have been granted. So
yeah, so let's talk about that, because you guys, your relationship and your friendship was forged in fire, it sounds like, several years ago. You've now come back together. So tell us kind of exactly how you guys are operating together and what you're doing together.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this. So we're at EDRS, right? So let's talk about utility for a second, or energy, right? These energy companies have aspirations. They have aspirations to go after, let's say, a group 3 or a group 4. They have aspirations either to prepare for 108 or dive right into it via 44807 in preparation for 108. When utilities get into these programs and they start realizing, okay, this is a little bit more burdensome than I was originally intending it to be, and there's all these different perspectives of criteria for building these programs, and arguably one of the most important parts is getting regulatory approval to do so, right? And I think, Charlton, yesterday you were talking about the airworthiness element versus the programmatic element for a 40 operational,
yeah.
Right, for a 44807. Chances are a customer does not understand exactly what that even means.
Yeah.
Until after they start their program. And that is, that's a challenge, right? And so the way I look at this is Tactien is the operational niche specialist in industry to help you with your operations, stand them up, give them to you, and then remain on standby for help if they need them later. And in my view of the collaboration, End State is the regulatory specialist, right? Because we don't do regulatory, and End State necessarily doesn't do the operational piece. So collectively as a team, we can go into a utility and say, look, we are your team of advisors to be a truly one-stop, womb to tomb advisory organization.
Charlton, did you want to pile on?
Yeah, we have some overlap, as you mentioned, on the 44807s, right? We've crafted, I guess it's 5 of those now that have gone through for various customers, and we tend not to shout those from the hilltop, because it's really the customers that are, the winners. They're the heroes in the story that come out the other side with revenue operations, but they're household names that the industry knows, right? So we tend to work behind the scenes on either the exemptions, the waivers, or the airworthiness piece, right? The actual hardware. What is the product that you are trying to get certified? To what level does it need to be certified? And push that through the wickets with the FAA. So it's a high trust relationship between us, our clients, the FAA, and with Nate's group. So that enables a whole lot of, I guess, more rapid communication between us and FAA and our clients. And it's getting complex problems done, right? So we can get a Part 107. We've gotten some unique ones in the recent past, again, that our name's not on it, but they're out there, that are harder to do, particularly in the counter drone or counter UAS segment. And we'll continue to get those, but really our niche is the really tough problems to solve that are more complex, require more rigor, require more collaboration across industry and FAA.
So just to be clear, in terms of, your menu of different aircraft or technologies that you serve or advise on collectively, we're talking what, drones? I just heard counter drone. Nate, you mentioned helicopters and manned aircraft. So did you, Charlton. I mean, what's kind of, if I had a list to choose from, if you were giving me a short pamphlet on here's all the things we do, what would that rundown be?
That's a hard one. Jeez,
is it easier to say what you don't do?
It's across the spectrum, right? From small UAS up through, for example, the Part 25 stuff, the big airline stuff, and or the high altitude pseudo satellite stuff. The differentiator between it's not really the size, it's really how hard is that problem to solve, right? So on Nate's operational side, he's running operations, overseeing operations for helicopter companies that are doing services, right? We're supporting Part 135 operators and getting their certificates. So but they're unique, right? We're not doing the run of the mill stuff, right? We're not going to template your documents for a Part 135 for a small manned aircraft operation. That's already out there. Yeah, you don't need us for that, right? But if you're trying to do a drone program for drone delivery and it's cross-border, or you need to do work offshore, or you're doing something combining rockets and airplanes and drones, and all those approvals need to be dovetailed together, that's where we can help.
Wow. Okay. And are you guys just focused primarily on the United States in what you're doing together, or do you also have overseas clients as well?
Yeah, we have overseas clients. Yep.
Okay, very cool. So, Nate, you mentioned like these hard lessons learned, and for the audience out there, when you guys walk into an organization, whether it's someone in the energy sector or otherwise, what's the most common, kind of, let's say, what's the most common thing that people are getting wrong that you're routinely confronting? In other words, I think you and I have talked about this offline, right? But just share with people, what is kind of the biggest mistake that you see repeated time and time again in people trying to build these programs?
So, full context before I give my answer.
Sure.
I'm speaking more on the complex operations. And
Absolutely.
when I say complex, greater than group one. And
Okay.
when talking about the paradigm of complex, typically the larger the group, the more complex it is, generally. Yes. The two biggest things I see walking in and speaking with customers is actually there's two things. Number one, they think it's easy. And number two, it's a lot of, well, this organization was able to do it, and so I can do it too. And the answer is you can. You can conceivably get these approvals. But I don't think there's an understanding to the levels of complexity in building the program and starting from day one and having a fully 44807 approved outfit with 91113 with onboard DAA, right? I'm just giving you an example of a really complex
DAA
one.
being detect and avoid. I'm sure most of our listeners know, but just to be clear.
I acronym dropped, I'm sorry. And so, understanding that process. And then, I guess there's one more part to this. There's going to be challenges and there's going to be delays, right? You can plan for all of this as detailed as possible, but there are certain milestones throughout the process where this is a learning experience for everybody in some perspectives. Yeah. And the program is not going to necessarily follow the exact schedule you set. You try and plan for it and you plan for those delays, but it's going to happen regardless.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's like 3 points, really. It's not necessarily going to be easy. It's going to take some time, and there is no one size fits all solution. So Charlton, how about you? What do you? I mean, just either to elaborate on that, or just like your own perspective of some of the things you've run into in your own, career.
Yeah. So in a complementary way, I think Nate described that well, and I'm a huge proponent of having a really solid concept of operations. Sometimes it's a deliverable, and we use it as a mechanism for getting approvals. But if a company will run through a concept of operations with us, or when they have to, it always reveals the kind of complexity that Nate's talking about, right? It forces the company to answer questions about what their operation looks like, what their hardware looks like, in ways that they haven't asked themselves before because they're inside, right?
Right.
For them, it all works. It's all good, and the FAA should just approve it. Well, you've got to tell that story through the concept of operations so that the FAA can understand what it is you're trying to prove, what's the hardware, what's the environment it's supposed to work in, and what's its intended function. And if you can do that as a company, and we help them do that, then the FAA will give you an approval based on that really well-written concept of operations. It drives requirements in both the system and the operational approvals you need, right? So it's a key element of getting this work done, and it reveals that complexity to these clients.
Yeah, speaking of well-written, just for those out there that don't know, both of these gentlemen are ambassadors for Autonomy Global. Nate is our energy ambassador, and Charlton's our certification ambassador. No shock there. And they have an amazing body of work on the Autonomy Global website. You guys should check out. Charlton, you mentioned earlier, I think, size, and Nate has an article called Size Matters. It's still in our top 10, and this isn't necessarily a recent article, but it's on 44807. And so if you want to deep dive on that topic, check it out, because he runs through all the things you guys need to be thinking about. And Charlton recently just posted up an article about AI and how, it was funny. I mean, we were almost coming to blows on the stage yesterday because one of the oil and gas stakeholders, asset owners, said, we do our own stuff and, we use Claude. And Charlton was like, okay, that's great, but like the FAA is using Claude too. And so that was, Charlton's article as well. But I want to like kind of elaborate on that a little bit from your perspective, from both of your perspectives. When you guys put a ConOps, work with a company or an organization to put a ConOps together to go to the FAA, what kind of areas are you seeing the FAA pushing back on primarily? In other words, if I'm a customer client of yours, what are maybe the top 3 or 5 things I need to think about that the FAA is going to really be, kind of noodling down on these ConOps?
So each branch of the FAA has different requirements or different things they want to see in their, there's the operations of the FAA and the engineering side of the FAA under air. And they emphasize different things. On the air side, it's very quantitative. They like to see the numbers and the stats and the description of the material and described functions very clearly. And you may end up doing a functional hazard assessment based on the concept of operations. On the operations side, under flight standards, they really want to see a well-described, all the mitigations that you're going to use to get your waiver, your exemption, all the things that make it safe. Often they want to see detailed descriptions of the C2, the command and control networks, and how they gracefully degrade if and when they fail. And that's an area that's not well addressed. Same thing with the, I guess, operational basis for which they train and keep people current and proficient on the platforms. Just saying, hey, I've got my 107, or hey, I've got my private pilot's license. That's a check in the box, but how do we know that that crew is qualified on that day to go do that operation and they were properly briefed?
Yeah.
Right? So all those things need to be baked in, and that's again, it's all fleshed out in the concept of operations.
Yeah, and Nate, from the operational side, where you're kind of, your bailiwick, if you will, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, the concept of I mean, I don't know, the concept of operations piece. I mean, that's kind of the tagline for all of this. I think that all of the things that Charlton just discussed, and this is another trend in industry that we need to get away from, is that everything that happens in the SUAS space with the concept of operations rarely, if ever, translates into a ConOps for a larger aircraft, right? It's totally different pilot requirements, totally different currency requirements. Your SOPs are not completely different format, but it's a totally different flavor of operations, right? So I think that's a major change in industry that is going to be a learning experience as these folks start going from, hey, I have 500 part or Group 1 SUAS multicopters, and now I'm going to go out and buy a 350-pound fixed wing. Well, that's a totally different animal, right?
Yeah, Part 108 is going to flush that out too. So the good news is that Part 108 is coming someday, and it will give clear guidance to companies that want to go out and do complex operations, BVLOS.
I know we're all laughing about when it's coming out. We did hear rumor. I don't like to spread rumors, but it wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me if it actually did drop on the 4th of July, considering the FAA has dropped almost every other big major regulation out on like a holiday, like Christmas Eve, or New Year's Day. So, so that's soon, if that's true. I mean, that's like next week, basically. Unbelievably, this is our last show of Energy Month, sponsored by BVLOS. So crazy. But we're all waiting for it. So let's talk for a second about what people are doing right? Like, I don't like to go negative completely. Like, when you walk into a place and you see A, B, or C, what kind of clues you in that, okay, these guys have their stuff together? Like, what are the hallmarks of successful programs, even the ones that still yet invite you in?
Want me to go first?
Yeah.
So couple of things I look at, and maybe I should clarify. There, in my opinion, there's a lot of things that are going very, very well in the industry, and there's a lot of companies and organizations doing this fantastic work in these types of operations. But a couple of things to look at and maybe self-evaluate if you're watching this from your own organizational perspective. Are my SOPs as they sit today sufficient for my operations that I operate within today?
SOPs being standard operating procedures. I know we said it once before, but once again.
All right. And so is my safety management system / SMS, right? Is that up to par, right? Is that within industry standard? Does that fit for my organization? Do I have, and I think this is really important, do I have a continuous improvement program in place today? Am I auditing my safety management system or my standard operating procedures? Am I providing currency and continuous training and support to my operators? Does every single level of my program have some sort of training element that we built as an organization, speaking third person, that we built and evolve with over time? I think those fundamental principles about building a program and scaling a program sets that organization up for a easier transition into larger, more complex aircraft.
And that's more common today, I think.
Way more common, 100%.
Yeah, companies are embracing SMS practically voluntarily now.
Yeah.
As
well, it's good. It might be required eventually, but it's just good business sense anyway. Anytime you can reduce your risk, and make things safer, there's value to that, right? Like, even if there's a little bit of pain to establish it, at the end of the day, it's more painful. As they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right?
Yep.
Because, that big aircraft or even those small ones go down, they hurt somebody or they do something bad, that could jeopardize your entire operation.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
Certification is an exercise in trust, period, and stop. It's quantified trust in some way, shape, or form. And really, it's a liability exercise for both the company and the FAA. If the FAA certifies your operation, you've got something to lean on as a company that if and when things go wrong, and gravity is always on, so things do, you actually have something to lean back on as a company and say, hey, we did our due diligence both for this operation and this hardware, so it was safe enough for its intended function.
I was surprised by, guys, when we were on the panel yesterday, the idea of UAS traffic management for some, for the oil and gas stakeholders that sound like some of them have complex programs. They're flying helicopters, they're flying drones, some of them flying fixed wing as well, possibly all at the same time in the same airspace. It was almost like a foreign, like, why would we need that concept? How do you see, UTM, in terms of clients like in the energy sector? Like, do you think it's going to be a thing? Because, like, when you look at, just drone delivery, right, which has been the template model, if you will, like down in Dallas, Fort Worth area, the operational evaluation happening down there with a whole bunch of different people, why would a critical infrastructure owner or operator not want to embrace something like UTM for those kind of ops?
So, well, I think they're going to have to embrace UTM, but also the other side to that coin is that largely some of those larger utilities you're talking about, Dawn, there's so many layers of active aviation that go on with them today that maybe UAS, unmanned aircraft system traffic management, is not officially part of their program, but it largely is, just in a different way. So, for example, one of the utilities that was on your panel yesterday happens to be the largest electric utility aviation program, I think, in the world, definitely the United States. Wow. And over at that utility, there's something like 30 helicopters, 20 airplanes, and I believe over 200 SUAS. That's just the utilities assets. That doesn't account for the other helicopters, drones, and fixed wings that enter that system as a contractor. So at any given time, it's all of those aircraft owned by the utility operating on their system and Let's throw in 300 other aircraft from other contractors that are working on the system to support that.
Wow.
That's all managed internally by that utility. And that's a little bit of an outlier because of how large they are. But they have essentially built their own scheduling, dispatch, and air traffic management department that are full-time employees just at the utility for just that task.
Almost like private business aviation. I'm looking at Charlton as I think about NBAA and, you know, the schedulers, dispatchers, the MRO, like that whole system with charter aviation. It sounds like some of these utilities that are now kind of, like you said, so expansively using aviation across the board, have their own, well, they have their own aviation departments. And so it'll be interesting, you know, whenever Part 146 comes out, you know, how that gets layered into what already exists.
Well, and it's happening. So again, the technology is going to be ahead of the regulations. Always going to be that, right? Yeah. So you mentioned the Key site down here in Texas, where all the drone delivery work is happening. That is no longer experimental or novel in any way.
Right.
Like they're established Part 135 operators flying drone deliveries, and they are expanding all over the U.S. this year. Like it's coming down near you. It's no longer, you know, for practice, it's for keeps. And it's so that is a forcing function, right? Alongside the Part 108 coming out, another forcing function, alongside all the work that's being done in utilities and oil and gas with all these systems, another forcing function. So the technology is going to evolve and is going to emerge that allows all these entities to communicate their intention to each other in order to avoid, well, in order to make their operations more efficient and to avoid mid-air collisions and other hazards. So we're going to see electronic conspicuity, which is evolving in the manned space, transition into the unmanned space beyond what we know now as ADSB, and don't ask me to spell that out, automatic dependency. Yeah, anyway, so all the systems that are going to be in place to make it possible to universally understand where all these entities, once they're up and away and in the airspace, are, and coordinate those movements so you don't have mid-airs. That's what's going to happen. Now, whether the rules support that right off the bat or not, who knows? But the exemptions, waivers, whatever, permissions will be granted for that to work.
Excellent, excellent. You know, so as you guys are sitting there, you're looking into your crystal ball in terms of what's next. We you know, we are all hoping 108 and 146 come out soon. We've got 2209 rulemaking pending for, you know, kind of security around critical infrastructure. That's a hot topic here. That's, I think, why we're seeing so many counter UAS companies showcasing here for the very first time. You know, I've been coming to Nate, you've been coming to the show for 10 years. I've been coming just for, you know, a handful of years, the last several. And that's a first, I think. So how do you see, you know, things evolving and in terms of the energy sector, but also then in terms of the work that you guys think you'll be doing together with them?
Yeah, so I think CUAS is a major addition. Well, first of all, yes, it is an addition to the show this year at EDRS, and it's my understanding it's very well received. It certainly appears that way when you're on the floor and you also speak to the people on the panels. I think that counter UAS and Section 2209's existence will expand counter UAS detection technologies on energy infrastructure assets in a very big way here within the next year or two. I think that's number one. I think number two, yeah, with Part 108 coming out and 44807 as it exists today, you can see it and you can speak to these utilities. There's far more interest in larger aircraft systems now than there's ever been.
Yeah, good point. I mean, Skyways is here. You know, that aircraft, you walk in the front door of the expo hall, that thing is ginormous. And I was talking to them yesterday. Hopefully we'll get them on the show later this year. But they're doing some amazing things, ship to shore. You know, kind of that 12 nautical mile thing you were talking about, Charlton as well. You know, that's a big issue, right? So by the way, great article well, actually, I don't want to say it's great because I wrote it, but it was great content that I based it on from Courtney Freeman and another gentleman, attorney, from Exponential, where they talked about some of the legal issues there. So check that out on the site. But great point. You know, we're going to see more counter UAS. I think we're going to see bigger aircraft. What do you think, Charlton?
Yeah, I think the industry feels like it's within reach now, right? And we heard from the stage yesterday, some of these operators are seeking to replace as much of their manned aircraft capability as practical with unmanned systems, if for no other reason than to mitigate the risk of human life loss, right?
That is so true. That is so true. We did hear that. And, you know, even as we look at some of these bigger aircraft, I mean, on this floor or otherwise, I think there still is a vision for some of them, right? Like this is what we're doing first. We're doing cargo first. And this is really no shock probably to the three of us. You know, and then maybe someday we're going to be carrying people. You know,
matter
so
of demonstrating reliability, right?
absolutely. I mean, there is this bridge, you know, between the drone space and the AAM eVTOL world. I call it the eVTOL world. A lot of these aircraft are not necessarily electric and they're not necessarily vertical takeoff and landing, but you know what I mean. Just kind of using that term generically. You know, there is such a nexus, and I think we're just now also starting to see that connection even more. Where
Yeah.
before it was like never the two shall meet, right?
Right.
Now
Yep.
these I'll call them industries, if you will, they're realizing we're just kind of part of a full spectrum aviation program. And
Yeah.
that's
Sometimes referred to as advanced air mobility, right? Or
yeah.
AAM. And the powered lift piece is important in that, and because it reduces so much reliance on the infrastructure on the ground. So if they want to scale, particularly in urban areas, and they want to do it, you know, safely, they're going to have to demonstrate that all that technology, that it's going to have to be type certified, right? And there's the FAA came out with the powered lift rule for the
About
operator
2 years ago.
Yeah, right. So and I'm very thankful that my background in Harriers was actually, turns out, powered lift. So I now have a powered lift rating from the FAA based on that experience, right? And other military pilots that have flown V-22 or Harriers can go out and get that rating as well by military comparison to their civil, added to their civil ratings. So that's all coming together. And to your point, like the levels of trust are going to go, and acceptance, societal acceptance, are going to go up and up and up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, you guys have been doing great things together. And I think from our conversations offline at the show, business is booming for you. Do you have any announcements to make, Charlton, here for the first time on the show?
Yeah, thanks for the reminder. Yeah, we're looking to hire an integrator, right? And as somebody who understands operations, has operated at a high level with a lot of discipline in programmatics, and is able to keep the wheels on the bus at End State Solutions, right? Keep the client, keep us producing for clients the way they need us to, and navigate complicated programs and put that all together. So yeah, Russ, my dear departed program and project manager, got scooped up by Google Wing. So I guess they're plucking from the right places as they expand. And you know, good for him. It's a great opportunity, and now that creates a great opportunity with us as we grow.
Awesome. So you heard it here. How do people apply for this position? How do they reach you for that?
Yeah, just send an email, cevans@endstatesolutions.com, expressing your interest. And there's a LinkedIn post that describes what we're looking for, and we'll go from there. So, you know, nothing's hard and fast. It's intended to be a full-time position, remote, and we might be able to navigate some of that as well. So just hit me up.
Well, very good. Okay, so we're all here in Houston together. Lots of stuff happening in the next 6 months as we kind of wrap up the show for the next 5 minutes or so. Where can people like find you? Like what's up next for you guys? Commercial UAV. I know, Charlton, we're going to be doing AGN live from MBA base, Business Aviation Conference and Expo again this year, hopefully on a panel together. What do you guys have coming down the pike?
Yeah, so for me and for Tactien, we're pretty much heads down for most of the summer on current client tasking, which will involve a significant amount of travel all over the place. So we tend to live in airplanes sometimes more than our own homes. So there's a significant amount of work there. I think for me personally, I'll more than likely be a commercial UAV in Vegas if my customer schedule allow it. And I think that's generally it as far as official stuff. But who knows? I mean, I have no plans tomorrow, but that doesn't mean I'm not booking a ticket tomorrow.
Yeah, people don't realize. In fact, somebody asked me yesterday, hey, what's going on with the drone and AAM policy symposium that AVSI put on? It used to be in July. It's actually in November, November 3rd to 6th. And I think their defense event is going to run concurrently with it at the Nationals ballpark again. So perhaps I'll see you guys there too. But Charlton, how about for you?
So the CDA event at the end of July is going to be on the schedule, as well as the others you mentioned. And we are actually getting far more engaged with the counter UAS world as they seek operational approvals in the civil airspace to do test and evaluation that they need to do to present products to the Department of War. So there's a big sucking sound there in terms of need, and it's not easy because a lot of the things they want and need to do involve kinetics, right? They involve delivering ordnance, which can be done safely in a civil setting, but it requires, again, complex approvals, right?
Well, and there's so much more to that. People don't realize, first of all, the whole FCC thing and, kind of the foreign, bans and everything Jennifer Richter's been screaming about through the, off the top of the mountain, for years. So by the way, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should be concerned because you should know what I'm talking about. So check out Jennifer Richter and Haley Preacher's webinar that's on Autonomy Global in the podcast tab under regulation, and an article on Autonomy Global about that. But, CMMC, right? The cyber piece of all of this, right? I mean, these are all like DoD like requirements. So, lots of work here, lots of job security for you guys, quite frankly, across the board, not just in the energy sector, but for people looking to capture some of those defense dollars, and et cetera. But all right, we're down to 2 minutes left, and I want to make sure I cede the floor to both of you, each of you. You get 1 minute for your parting shots here. So I'm going to go first, Nate, and make sure, Nate, you tell them also how to reach you.
Sure. So my parting shot is that I'm very optimistic and quite frankly excited at this point for the amount of maturation this industry is presenting itself with. I think that there's going to be some really interesting innovations and pen to paper operations coming here shortly. So that's exciting. To reach me, you can reach me on LinkedIn or www.tactiengroup.com.
Very good. And we do have the QR codes up here. So y'all, if you're interested, just take a second and scan those and go right to their website. So go ahead, Charlton.
Yeah, so I echo Nate's enthusiasm and optimism. I'd say I'm very grateful, right? The industry is growing. It is evolving, right? It's maturing. And all those things lead to more and better, right? So I think the level of complexity is going to continue to increase. And I think the rules are going to start to catch up with that a little bit, which will just enable more complex operations. So it may not get easier. I think folks might be a little disappointed when they see Part 108 in detail because it's still going to be a complicated process. But the good news is there'll be a very clearly laid out process, right?
Yeah, so, it won't always necessarily be bring me a rock.
Right. Here's my rock. It's the rock you said I needed to bring. So, right. So exactly. Yeah, that's all good, great news. And I am encouraged by this administration's support of this industry. Right. The folks in the White House right now are very, very bullish on the drone, counter drone industry for good reason. Right. So the administration supporting the technology.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think world events are driving that too. I mean, how can you not be bullish when everybody in the freaking globe is using drones mostly on the battlefield, and that's, I think, driving some of this 2209, right? This the safer sky, like all the things we've seen, have been somewhat honestly reactive, but you know what? Great. Let's get it going because we've been talking about it for years. Drone landed on the White House lawn in 2015.
Right.
And people, like Nate said, 333, people have been flying drones, doing amazing things for years. Like, let's go, right? Let's go. So
Absolutely.
we are there. I think we're going to start going, and you guys are going to help us get there, and so many of your clients as well. So thanks for what you do, and thanks again for being on the show. This, everybody, wraps up a great month we've dedicated to the theme of energy. Again, thanks to BVLOS Aerospace, who's here in force, by the way. And that's all she wrote. Next month, we're focused on tech leaders, and we're going to kick that off with True Weather Solutions, our month sponsor. So Dawn is not here, the Weather Dawn, at this show, but man, we've been talking about weather. You can't talk about ops without weather. So anyway, thanks, you guys. Hopefully see you on the floor again before I head home, but it's been a great week. It's been a great show. Thanks again. And for everybody out there, we are out here.